Russia and Ukraine have stepped up war efforts on both sides as they held peace talks in Istanbul. Ukraine has unleashed a massive drone strike inside Russia, targeting nuclear bombers and submarines. Will Ukraine's short-term win be the world's long-term loss? Our next report tells you how Ukraine carried out the deepest assault.
Ukraine has carried out the deepest and the most fiercest attack on Russia in 3 years of war. Thousands of kilometers behind the front lines, Ukraine unleashed a swarm of drones targeting nuclear bombers and submarines in 5 Russian strategic bases. The audacious drone assault left Russia's bomber aircraft in flames. Ukraine claims the most penetrative assault destroyed over 40 Russian aircraft. This includes Tu-95 and Tu-22 bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons and one of Russia's few remaining A-50 surveillance planes. But Russia hasn't confirmed the extent of damage.
I can say with certainty that this is an absolutely unique operation. What's most interesting, and this can now be stated publicly, is that the office of our operation on Russian territory was located directly next to FSB headquarters in one of their regions. In total, 117 drones were used in the operation, with a corresponding number of drone operators involved.
Ukraine delivered a massive blow to Russia under Operation Spiderweb. The operation not only left Russia shaken, but also informed the world that the landscape of modern warfare had completely changed. The clandestine attack had been 18 months in planning. Ukraine smuggled its explosive-laden drones into remote areas and unleashed them out of trucks. The deadly drone assault on the eve of Istanbul peace talks has raised concerns over Russia's retaliation. US says Zelensky carried out the attacks without notifying the White House. Trump's former advisor calls it a warning sign and a geopolitical insult to President Donald Trump, who has been trying to bring the war to an end. Despite Trump's attempts to disown it, the war has very much become Trump's war, on which US credibility now hangs by a thread. Ukraine's European allies are of the view that Russia's threat can't be ignored in the aftermath of the attack.
I very much hope not. And in order to make sure that that isn't the case, we need to prepare. But we cannot ignore the threat that Russia poses. We've seen what's happened in Ukraine just over 3 years ago. Those tanks rolled across a border, something I think all of us thought we wouldn't really see in our lifetimes, the invasion of a European country.
The dangerous attack has led to the million-dollar question: will Putin take a nuclear recourse? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Joining us live on the broadcast is Dr. Glenn Deason, who is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway and an editor at the Russia in Global Affairs Journal. Thank you so much for joining us on WION. Ukraine says that its drone strike was a bold move, but Trump's former advisor has called it a geopolitical insult to Trump if the White House indeed was not informed. In your opinion, what does this say about Ukraine's move? Some believe that it has invited more trouble for itself. Others say that it was justified.
Well, it depends whether or not this is true. If Ukraine carried out this strike against the nuclear bombers, the nuclear deterrent of Russia, without the US knowledge, this suggests that America's proxy effectively has gone rogue by not informing it anymore about such a dangerous attack. And of course, if Trump did know about this, the Americans were informed, then it represents escalation we have not seen ever before. That is an effort to destroy the nuclear deterrent of Russia, which again would signal to the counterpart that the United States might have intentions to go for a nuclear first strike or something more dramatic. So again, it sounds very dramatic, but this is incredibly an escalation we have never seen before. So it really does matter whether or not the Americans did know. But I think either way, the Ukrainians might end up in a worse place, because either they will lose some support by the Americans, or the Russians, either way, I think, would engage in some retaliatory strike, because I can't imagine the Russians being willing to risk a crisis of credibility by not restoring its deterrent. I mean, if you attack the nuclear force of Russia in this way, and there's no response, it will be a crisis as well. So it's quite incredible that there has been such a reckless escalation, and it's also quite incredible that you haven't heard that big of a pushback from either the Americans or the Europeans. So either way, I think this is going to end up spinning out of control. And again, I think it represents a huge step towards nuclear war now.
Yeah, all we're hearing about is whataboutism for sure right now. Has Ukraine's drone attack, this that we're talking about, as you mentioned, it was very significant. Has it exposed Russia's vulnerabilities in any way?
Well, it obviously did, because they had a lot of their critical military infrastructure attacked. And again, this would have to be fixed in some ways. That is, any nuclear bombers parked in the open, where under proper transparency, all of this would have to change in the age of this drone warfare, and they would have to have more secrets around this nuclear deterrent, given that this is no longer sacred. There was a time when the United States and the Russians would never even think about attacking each other's nuclear deterrent. But again, this time has now seemingly come to an end. So this is, again, I don't think the world would necessarily be the same after this. And the vulnerabilities of Russia, which I guess lays open now, they will have to find a response for this. So it's not going to be good for transparency, and it's not going to be good for stability.
Dr. Glenn Deason, I appreciate your company. It's always great speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on WION.
My pleasure.